This season, the game begins before the games begin. On August 26th, it's FanDuel Futures Day. 24 hours of deals on all your football season predictions. Futures Day is coming. Visit the FanDuel app to learn more and get your picks ready now. FanDuel, play your game. 21 plus and present in select states. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Hello and welcome once again to the Trail Daddy podcast. I am Dave Deckard, managing editor of BlazersEdge.com, and the hits just keep on coming for the Trailblazers this summer. We have talked to you about Jrue Holiday. We have talked to you about Young Hansen. We have talked to you about Damian Lillard. For goodness sake, we thought we were mostly done, but oh my goodness gracious, here we go again. The Trailblazers are reportedly being sold to a new ownership group led by Tom Dundon, who is the owner of the Carolina Hurricanes, a Texas businessman getting his sports jollies in on the coasts of the United States. Raleigh, of course, in North Carolina, and Portland now in Oregon. And my goodness, it is a momentous thing. The last time this happened was, back in 1988, when Portland's original ownership group, after nearly a couple decades, sold to Paul Allen, a young billionaire just out of Microsoft, who had made his billions with that company and decided he was going to invest in the sports team that kept him going when he was in college and that he enjoyed seeing. And, he bought the team. There was consternation. There was fear at that point, as there is in any transition. The Blazers had, of course, had a championship with their old Larry Weinberg ownership group. And then beyond that, Allen was an unknown. He had big money, which at the time was somewhat unknown in the league. There were only a couple of billionaire owners at that point. Everybody was saying, will he stay local? Will he change the tenor of the team? Will he change the culture of the team? All of those things did happen. The Blazers stayed in town, obviously, but the team's culture and outlook changed under Allen. He went nearly immediately, not exactly, but close to Bob Whitsitt. After riding out the height of the Clyde Drexler years, Whitsitt dismantled that team, built the traveling all-star team with Rasheed Wallace and company. And then that fell apart. The Jailblazers era. You have the Brandon Roy resurrection. You have Neil Olshey and the Damian Lillard era, all of which happened under Allen's tenure. Then, of course, Paul died of cancer a few years ago. His sister Jody inherited the estate and the team, and now she is going to sell to Dundon and his ownership group. This will be only the third time that new owners have taken charge of the Trailblazers, and the first one was the original owners. So really only second time they've been sold. I mean, it's always a scary thing. It's always an interesting thing, but there's reason to hope that this era will last a while. Dundon has money, not as much money as Allen did, but he is young. He is a billionaire, as you have to be now to own a sports team in the NBA. I took generally comfort from a few things. First of all, the vibe surrounding him, at least in terms of the franchise stability, is noticeably chill. There's not a lot of bubbling rumors that the franchise could be at risk of moving, that that's anywhere on the agenda, that this is even in someone's foggiest dream. it feels like he bought the team for the same reason he bought the Hurricanes. That he's interested, that he feels like it's a good investment, and that he wants to run a sports franchise. The Hurricanes are still in Raleigh, and not only that, as we wrote on site, they have made the playoffs 7 straight years since Dundon took over, after missing the playoffs 9 years prior to him. So, look, this is not a bad track record. It's not bad that he understands small markets. It's not bad that he understands the culture and the foibles of same. It's not bad that he's helped turn the Hurricanes around. I think those are good signs. Nowhere around, and, I have a pretty good passive radar for these things after 20 odd years doing this. Nowhere around does there seem to be real concern. Now, there's always doubt. There's always questions when a new owner takes over, and we're going to have those answered over time. But the main one, will the Blazers move, appears to be not yet. Now, Dundon himself has mentioned that he wants to work on a public-private renovation of the arena or rebuilding of the arena. And this is tricky. The city of Portland is saying renovation. The language Dundon used, I believe, was partnership towards a new arena or something to the effect. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he has to build an entire new arena. Maybe renovation is in his sphere of possibility as well. But that will be the main thing to see. That's the tension point here, as we've said all along, that still has to be resolved. But it appears like both parties are remarkably amicable at this point. Sometimes you get people digging in their heels, like the city of Seattle did with the Sonics and Clay Bennett. And you already know that this is going to be a fight. It doesn't feel like a fight is coming here. The mayor of Portland, the governor of Oregon, has already said, we're amenable to these discussions, and let's figure out how to do this. Tom Dundon has said, I'm amenable to this discussion, let's figure out how to do this. Now, if the government says renovation and Dundon says new arena, there's going to be a lot of discussion there. Maybe they don't meet, who knows? But if there's wiggle room in the middle, they both appear to be willing to find it. That's a really good sign too. In other words, other than, as I said in one interview, getting an owner who was already wearing a vintage Bill Walton jersey and had a Clyde Drexler bobblehead on his desk, I mean, that owner would have been the best. But short of that, for someone who comes outside the area, honestly speaking, this is probably one of the better options that you could have. The Hurricanes interview, I wrote an article about this. When he took over the Hurricanes, he had, of course, an inaugural press conference, which I assume he will have with the Blazers as well. You'll be able to hear from him right then. But he said a few things. He said he wanted to drive a culture change in the team and center on the fan experience, that he valued winning more than he values money, and that, he was driven to make changes and to have them happen pretty quickly. That would be music to the ears of Trailblazers fans. I mean, this is what they've been calling for. Now, Jody Allen has not done, I think, a terrible job. However, her ownership has been placid. Nothing has gone too wrong. Nothing has gone too right. There are things on each end of the spectrum. She renewed a lot of contracts in management that she ended up taking back, basically, and having to get rid of those people. That's not a great sign. On the other hand, the Blazers have made slow and steady growth through this rebuild. They've drafted some players that most people kind of like. They've made up with Damian Lillard. I mean, there are positives as well. So, look, there might be more bad than good, depending on how you make the argument, but it's not like she rocked the boat or upset the apple cart. that placidity has become to be resented after X number of years, right? At the point where the Blazers were deconstructing, it was probably not a bad thing. It's like being on ice. The one thing you don't do is hit the brakes or steer the car real hard because you're just going to skid. You want to keep it slow and steady and try to point it forward. Yeah? Okay, that's fine. But once you start going, I mean, you're in the race, and Blazer fans either want to get back in the race or hope the Blazers are back in the race right now. You got to press that gas pedal, and you got to make some aggressive moves. Those have not been forthcoming yet during Jody Allen's tenure. And, you know, it feels like Dundon will make a more proactive or just regularly active approach. Blazer fans will probably like that. The word out of Carolina, Henry Abbott quoted some of this, and then there are other sources that he's active in ownership, but not meddlesome in terms of he has ideas, he has opinions, he's involved, he visits the franchise, but he doesn't live in town. He doesn't micromanage. The coaches make the decisions. I assume the general managers make the decisions. The Hurricanes have been all right negotiating the salary cap. They haven't held on to players too long or not long enough. It's been, pretty much a success story there. The NBA has a little more intricate salary cap, and one with, the NBA salary cap is kind of, I don't want to say exactly the model, but it's probably the most seasoned and one of the most exercised of the salary caps. It's deeply embedded in the DNA of the league. So, there'll probably be an extra wrinkle or two in here for him to learn. But as long as he has a good general manager and good executives advising him, it appears like he's going to account for that and listen to that advice and etc. That's pretty much what you want in an owner. There are a few ways to be a good owner, but there are lots of ways to be a bad one. It feels like Dundon hasn't been a bad one. That's basically what you hope. If you have a good one, you probably have a chance. At least you can blunder into some good lottery picks or whatever and find some success. A bad owner makes it really difficult. He doesn't seem like a bad owner, so good enough. Team stays, not a bad owner. That's okay. What comes up next? The sale's got to go through and be approved first of all. So obviously there's that. Hopefully we don't have the cart before the horse, but the horses are galloping right now. So if that cart's attached, that looks like it's going to go through, so be it. But it has to be approved first, obviously. Then we have to have the press conference with priorities and whatever. And then the big questions start. And fans want to talk about Scoot Henderson's and Denny Avdia's and stuff like that, renegotiating contracts and etc. That's kind of a Control-Alt-Delete on all that stuff. And the first decisions to be made probably are going to be management type decisions. Who stays in the senior executive roles? Does Bert Coldy stay on as an advisor, and how long? And how many senior executives now, Dwayne Hankins or whoever, right, stay in their roles? And for how long? Is there some kind of observation period, or does he have a ready-made cast of executives wanting to come in? Now, there are advantages and disadvantages either way. If you stay with the status quo, you have the continuity and you have the knowledge base, both of the franchise and of the league. I would say the latter is more important right now. You don't want to get a group that's inexperienced in there making trades or moves or salary cap decisions without being deeply familiar with the intricacies, because there are lots of ways that you can unintentionally hamstring yourself. So there's an argument to be made for keeping the management group in place. The argument against is that same status quo argument, that the vision that the current management has of the franchise is the vision you're kind of wanting to get away from if you're a Trailblazers fan. So you kind of want to mine the experience without inheriting all the assumptions, and that's kind of tricky. And what that usually looks like is it's not necessarily happening with the same people over time. There's a period in which you keep the status quo, and then that changes. Now, what that means for Joe Cronin, for instance, who I think has operated really well under Jody and under her priorities. And I think he has started to leave a distinct mark on this team. But because of the ownership style and franchise direction, it's been kind of an etching. It's been a shallow imprint. It's not been deep marks in the superstructure or carved in the cement or whatever it is, right? Because of the team situation and that ownership style, again, Joe's imprint has been light. It's been wide ranging. A lot of the team has changed, but I don't think you can look at the roster right now and go, oh yeah, these moves are all going to endure for a decade. What exactly about this roster will endure for more than 2 or 3 years? I'm not sure you can point to hardly anything. I mean, coach, no, not necessarily, kind of on thin ice. He did get an extension, but he doesn't have a good winning percentage. If he doesn't start winning, he's probably going to be gone. You have, Shaden Sharp, Scoot Henderson. You have Young Hansen. You have Donovan Klingon. A lot of the key members of this roster, key hopes of this roster, are really variable, that you still don't know how they're going to play out. And they could boom or they could bust. They could do something in between. No guarantee that they're going to be solid players in another 3 to 5 years. On the other end, you have Jeremy Grant. You have Drew Holiday. You have Damian Lillard, who presumably by 2008 will be gone, or, at least thinking about retirement. So they're not going to be there either. Somewhere in the middle, you probably have a Denny Avdia and a Toumani Camara, who by virtue of their play, you think you kind of want to keep long term. But I mean, Toumani, I think, can play anywhere, anytime. Denny, I think, is going to be good in most situations, but that's really a thin, again, that's a kind of a thin imprint. They're not like your structural pillar players. They are part of what's holding up the ceiling, but you don't look at them as the keystone necessarily. So really, you look across the board and you're going, well, Joe Cronin, what are you going to stake your tenure on? What are you going to stake your impression on? And I think if he left, or, if Dundon went with a new GM, Cronin would be remembered for the events that happened during his tenure, but not necessarily as an imprint way after. Contrast that with like Neil Olshey, who, for all he did or didn't do, like Damian Lillard, that draft changed the world. I think Kevin Pritchard did some things too with Brandon Roy and Greg Oden. Now, the Greg Oden thing didn't work out, but that still was a franchise-shaking moment that shaped the next decade, actually in Oden's absence and Kevin Durant's ascent as much as anything. But you get what I mean. These guys absolutely poured into the bedrock foundation. Cronin hasn't had the opportunity, maybe, and has made a different style of move. And so it's weird. It's kind of big and it's shallow. One wonders if a new owner will look at that and say, well, all I need to take care of this, honestly, is a mop. I don't have to change the course of the river. I don't have to move an ocean. I got this big shallow puddle, and if I mop it up and put it in a bucket, I can pour out that bucket in a different way. That's the variable here. I don't think Cronin has done anything wrong. I think he's done a good job. I'm just not sure there's a lot of deep roots there. Whether Dundon respects that and goes, that's exactly what we need for the next couple of years as I on board, and let's, keep this going, keep the direction going, and all weigh in, and then let's check with each other in a couple of years about whether we are mutually compatible. That's one possibility. Another possibility is just going, no, we want to change direction right now. presumably the sale's still going to take some time. So I think it's unlikely that they make a change right at the beginning of the season or even mid-season. But, the end of this year might be interesting times for the Blazers and their management staff. I think it makes Chauncey Billups' future much more variable, obviously. Cronin's as well, as we've just mentioned. And I think, some of the players who are starting to age into contracts, this also puts a little bit of, fire under them. They have to prove probably a little bit more, because remember, when you have a shared history with someone, when you invested in them, you tend to think more positively of them. Or another way to put it is, the more tenure you have with an organization, the more you are willing to take rewards in ways other than obvious results. In other words, if I have spent 20 years with an institution, right, and the institution has a down year, I'm probably going to ride that out for a couple reasons. First, I've seen a track record of them not, and I know it's possible. But also, over that 20 years, I have made a lot of different connections and received a lot of different feedback about the organization. And I get my rub or my joy or purpose through a lot of different things. It might be interaction with the staff. It might be seeing how the organization serves the people around it. It might be pride in the name of the organization, whatever it is. But this down year might make me go, this organization is not doing really well right now, but I have all these other contact points. I'm willing to accept them as valid, and I'm going to keep going. Whereas if you're brand new, the only thing you have with that organization is the obvious success. For instance, if you invest in an institution right now, and that institution starts to nosedive a little bit in the year to come, you really want to turn around that nosedive, because that's the only feedback and the only payback you're getting for your investment, because you don't have the relationship with the staff or the pride in the name or the whatever it is that the long tenured guy had. So a guy like Shaedon Sharpe or Scoot Henderson coming through the system, it's quite possible that the people who drafted them, the owner who approved them and whatever, are going like, this is a slow, gradual arc up. We've had experience with these guys. We've seen the dunks. We've seen progress. We know them personally. We know they're working hard. We're going to take that instead of immediate success, and we're going to feel comfortable re-signing them to this contract. Chauncey Billups is a prime example. When Chauncey Billups was extended, he has one of the worst records ever for a coach who was extended. In fact, I think, as we said, the worst record ever of a coach tenured this long with the same team. But the Blazers extended him because of all the other things that they had experienced with him. That Dundon doesn't have this. All he has is the record. He doesn't know Chauncey from Adam right now. And he may actually, I'm sure he'll take a year to get to know him. Again, I don't think he'll fire him. I don't think he's going to come in here and fire him in October. All right. But if the Blazers don't win, I think Chauncey's got a lot hotter seat right now than he did under Jody, obviously, who, approved the extension. I think the players, it's the same. Again, Shaedon Sharpe, Scoot Henderson. If they don't start producing, commensurate to their expectations, their place with this team is probably on shakier ground. They're more likely to be traded, and they're less likely to be extended for decent money, which is what the decision points are coming up. Believe it or not, Scoot Henderson was drafted in 2023. Very soon, he's going to enter his fourth year. I mean, that's decision time. That fourth and fifth years when you get your new contracts. If Scoot hasn't earned it, he might not get it. And that's a shift. Whether that's good or bad depends on your perspective. Of course, for Scoot, that's not great. For fans, that might look good. Everyone else, it's probably in the middle, depending on who Scoot turns into. We still don't know. But all we know is that probably the demands have been accelerated for those players in the tweener positions. It'll be interesting to see, I think, what relationship Dundon has with Damian Lillard directly. I mean, Dame's a star. Dame's famous. Dame is the face of the franchise still in many ways. And even when he was in Milwaukee, he was kind of that. Do they develop a rapport? What happens with Lillard going forward? And, you know, one of the things that new owners like is star power often. They see stars as indicative of success. Obviously, they're a name they know. They're already more inherently disposed to be comfortable with stars. You know, is this an avenue for a Damian Lillard or a Drew Holiday to move into a more advanced role? Coaching in some way or in the front office somehow? Did that path just get eased? Or was it easier under Jody Allen, who also knew them? I don't know. But look, if there's going to be a radical move, there's certainly more of a chance of it happening now. Until then, I mean, we're just reading tea leaves, though. I just think, obviously, this change... Look, you know, as a Blazer fan, the thing that you thought when you heard about a change in ownership is the team going to move? Remember that gut feeling, that fear, that uncertainty? Even if it turns out that the team doesn't move, okay? You can feel that and now have an analogy for the people in management, the people, the decision makers here. Is this team going to move for them? And I don't mean move from Portland. I mean, are their jobs going to be secure? Is the team going to find a new direction? How does all that work? I imagine there's gut feeling there with them. And, you know, we're just going to see how it all turns out. The other big thing that happened is the Blazers schedule came out. And I wrote about this a little bit. Every year, I like to see it come out and just get a read on this. And I mentioned, and it was a good memory. I can remember back in the early 90s, reading the Blazers schedule and having a hard time finding losses. You would find a lot of wins and you would find toss-ups, which was a really good sign. I mean, if you wouldn't absolutely guarantee a loss anywhere on the schedule back in those days. We're obviously a long ways from that now, nor do I expect to be there, but this is part of how I filter the schedule every year. I read through it and start getting my just what's your gut feeling? Just a quick read, like win, loss, whatever. And I don't mean definitively like a win or a loss is going to happen. It's what's your impression? What gut feeling do you get when you see this game? Like against the New York Knicks or against the Indiana Pacers, your gut feeling probably says a loss. Oklahoma City, it's an overwhelming, like, okay, the Blazers will be lucky to win this. And they might win 1 of 4, whatever. But honestly, each one you would have to predict, if you were doing it with a straight face, to be a loss. I do this with the schedule to see what it feels like. Now, the good thing is this year, there were some W's for the first time ever. For the last couple of years, I haven't really been able to slate in any wins for sure. Teams like Washington or San Antonio have been toss-ups, right? And it's like, okay, I don't think the Blazers are necessarily going to lose this, but I can't guarantee that they're going to win it either. So there's no W there. And there's literally no W's on the schedule then. This year, there were some W's. I mean, the Wizards are still terrible. Utah Jazz, you figured that might be a win in there somewhere, right? So we like seeds coming above the ground in the spring. We get some W's here with the schedule for the first time. So that's a positive sign. However, most of the games are still losses if you're forecasting logically. And even though there are more toss-ups, there still aren't enough. I mean, Sacramento, probably a toss-up. Atlanta, a toss-up. And, you know, that's being kind to Portland. But, you know, it's there, and that's good. Honestly, I'm struggling to find a lot more. I mean, it's still pretty polarizing. I don't know. San Antonio probably has gone beyond. Houston has certainly gone beyond. New Orleans, you think, is a win. Washington, we said, was a win. Brooklyn, hopefully, is a win. Philadelphia, maybe, might be a toss-up. I don't know. It depends on what they do. Phoenix might be a win. I mean, it could be a win. It could be a toss-up. So you got some teams in there, but I'm not able to name enough toss-up teams to say the Blazers are good yet. That's part of the problem. Also, if you read the schedule in aggregate, it's like the wins are still, or even the promising games are still too far between. Like if you just look at November, you go Lakers, probably a loss. Oklahoma City, loss. At Miami. Miami's probably a toss-up, right? But it's away, so maybe. Orlando, might be a loss depending on how good they are. They're in the ish category, toss-up or loss. New Orleans, that's a win probably, but you're on the road there. At Houston is a loss. At Dallas is a loss. Phoenix, toss-up or win. Chicago, who knows? That's probably another toss-up. At Golden State, loss. Oklahoma City, loss. Milwaukee, probably a loss. San Antonio, loss-ish. Oklahoma City, another loss. So look, you got some, it's like you're coming up for air. You're not even swimming yet. You're treading water and getting your head above water enough to breathe before the waves come and take you again. That's the feeling of the schedule. So I would say that it hasn't done anything to change my mind about the Blazers still having to fight pretty hard against the current. And if they're a playoff team, they're probably going to be a marginal one. I think it's an aspiration to make the playoffs, but I don't think it's going to be as easy as saying this is the year, and they might make the lottery again. The in between ground, the play in with Phoenix going down, maybe, but San Antonio probably will go up. So, it wouldn't surprise me to see the Blazers be in about the same position they were in last year. Let's put it that way. And the schedule hasn't really changed my mind. That it's front loaded, I think, is pretty obvious. The Blazers don't have to get off to a good start, but they can't spend the whole first half of the season figuring things out. It's okay if they lose games in October because they're still young and they will go on streaks in November or January or whatever, probably to make up for it. However, they can't get to mid-December without having gone through some of those streaks. I think we're going to know something about this team somewhere again around January, about the turn of the year. We need to look. And if they haven't absolutely stumbled, they're probably going to be okay. But if they are on a jagged down streak, it's still another 2 months before they really get the chance to get out of that. And by that point, it probably will be too late. So somewhere, here's what you're looking for in this schedule. Somewhere in October, November, December, no later, I would say, than maybe the first week in January, because it gets tough after that. All right. By January 5th, let's circle that game against the Jazz. So really, January 6th. By January 6th, we need to look and we need to see some W's on the board and some promise on the court where we're going, okay, there is direction. They are finding ways to win. The winning may be coming in fits and starts still, but it's there. If by January 6th, we're still going, well, we still got to figure out about this team and we're going to, it'll probably get better later. You're probably right. But before that later comes, I'm looking at Houston, New York Knicks, Golden State, Atlanta, Lakers, Sacramento, Miami. Then you get a little breather with Toronto, but you got Boston. You get a breather with Washington. Then you got New York and Cleveland, Phoenix, Memphis. Before it starts getting even a little bit easier. After mid-February, it does get better. Okay. If the Blazers have been winning, if they get to mid-February, they have a chance to win out. I mean, not the whole schedule, but you know what I mean. To go on a winning streak or two toward the end of the season and really make a charge at the playoffs. They've got a chance. But that critical point is going to be January 5th and 6th, right? Look at them right there. And then look again, I would say, around February 15th, around the All-Star break, and say, okay, those are the two decision points. Where are they? If there's good news at either or both, you are probably okay. if there's not really good news there, then, it's another lottery pick in a strong draft. Now, I say that understanding that March and April are a lot easier. The thing is that, again, if you dig yourself in a hole by mid-February, it's not going to matter how much easier March and April are. You're not going to make up enough ground to matter. And at best, you're going to succeed and then get yourself in the middle ground where you don't want to be. So, look, how happy is this season? First week in January, at the end of the first week in January, and at the All-Star break. Check then, and we will see. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this one, and we will be back in a couple weeks. Maybe we will finally have a quiet couple weeks. I mean, we thought, wow, the Blazers made a move. Maybe they're done. They made another move. Maybe they're done. They made another move. We'll see if they've got another one in store. Kind of doubt it. Things will probably be settled until training camp now, but we will start to look at the roster as constructed and a few other things next time. Until then, we will see you on Blazers Edge. Like, subscribe, and, leave a good review if you can at wherever you found this. And we will see you in a couple weeks.